as you can see behind me, a little bit of work has been done on the Guppy Mansion. Actually, kind of a lot of work that doesn't look like a lot of work, but let's go over the makeover. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and it's done, basically, but there's some small stuff I still need to do to the tank, but overall, as far as my goals for what I plan to do, it's done. And you can see a little bit, and we'll overlay a before and after shot, but beyond last week's video, I spent about an extra 6 hours working on this tank. 6. And it doesn't look like it. I know, and a lot of people are going to be like, most of it looks the same, except for this is empty, and when you get over my other shoulder here, it looks a little empty. So there's a few new plants in there. There's a couple Critum calamastratum, and then there's a bunch of Java fern from leftover, and some new Java fern as well. And then a couple pieces of Boos. That's Boos big leaf specifically. They're very small little rhizomes, but I'm going to let them grow in over time. And then one piece, very, very small piece of Anubias nangi, and that's also going to grow in. So let's go through the process of what I worked on, take you step by step, show you what was going on, and then we'll talk a few extra things that came up in the previous video in the comments. Okay, it's going to be a little different, but we're going to start with some of the cholla wood. These were, I'm going to bring this one piece a little closer for you, just so you can get a nice look at it, because big, chunky piece of cholla. This is how I like my cholla wood, by the way. These 3 pieces here were all gifts from my friend Nick over at Shrimpy Business. He knew that I liked cholla wood in a couple of conversations, and it's like, hey, I've got some cholla wood coming in. I'm going to send you a few pieces. Just thanks and enjoy. So big shout out to Nick over at Shrimpy Business. If you want to learn more about him, there's going to be an awesome video up in the corner about his story and what he does and his process. Just when I sat down with the interview with him, and he's a fantastic dude. So, all I've done with these pieces of cholla is, other than soak them for like several months, because when they're big like this, sometimes it takes a while for them to stop floating, because cholla is such a naturally light wood and it's very porous. It holds a lot of air, so it will be buoyant for a long time. So I had to soak these all for a couple of months to get them to just to finally sink down. And there's an even bigger piece that we'll see later that took, I think, 4 months. And that's without waiting with a rock. You could do it faster. There's better ways, trust me. But this was just the simple, lazy way. So all I've done is I pulled them out. I've used some paper towels underneath and some other paper towels to just lightly dab them dry. And that allows me to be able to use a little bit of super glue gel. Right? This is literally just bought at a dollar store. Super, super cheap, nothing fancy. And then here, of course, is our Java fern starts, and we're just going to start putting them in there. Now, there is the potential. Let's get like a small piece here, right? So we have a little piece like this. See how small that rhizome is? We can, in some of these pieces, friction fit these into some of the holes. So let me give you an example, and hopefully audio turns out okay on this because I'm sitting kind of the side of my microphone. But we would basically, and it helps to have a pair of tweezers to do this, just to like really get this in there. But all you're doing, can tell where it focuses, is just pushing into the hole and letting friction hold it in. You don't have to necessarily glue some of these. However, over time, in pieces like this, that rhizome is going to grow, and that will slowly but surely apply pressure from inside cholla and break it apart. So that's what happened with my big branches of cholla in this tank. So that's just kind of a demonstration of how you would friction fit to do something. You could do something like this, or we can glue. For the most part, I'm going to be gluing on a lot of these pieces, but where there's larger openings like this, and I have small babies. I will friction fit some in here. So I'm going to get to work on this stuff, and then we'll get it all in the tank. All right, let's talk a little bit about where we're at, what we got so far, and what we still have left to do. So I still have one more large piece of my cholla wood, and you're going to have to forgive me, I'm going handheld for a little bit here, but you can see we've got 1, 2, and then 3 of those pieces of cholla, and you can even see like little bits of algae and stuff that are in some of the Java fern I selected. That'll get cleaned up. I'm not worried about that. I mean, you really see like how big that mass of Java fern really was, because you see these 3 logs, and they're big, but compared to how much tank is visible now, and you can even hear like there's a lot more noise coming from the overflow just because of the amount of plant mass that's been removed brings down the water level. Then over here, you can see I got all that moss out. There was some more Java fern, and there's still actually some strands of moss. It's literally like stuck to the back wall, if you can see that. And then I had, there were some stem plants over there, as well as a lily, and that lily is now toward the bank of the tank over here. There's 3 total plants, or 4 total plants, actually, I'm sorry. That is Nymphaea Gardneri Santarum. It's a really cool lower height lily. It will grow tall if you let it, but it actually propagates by runner, so you can get this thing to carpet over time, which is really neat. So we have one big piece of cholla left, and in the process, you'll remember, I'm going to grab my bucket. We're going to come up top here for a sec. Remember how full this was? That's how much is left. So I really pushed, and I mean, you can see this from up top. We'll kind of give you an angle here. You can see just how much fern density I put between friction and glue on these pieces of wood. And the goal is really simple. It's basically accounting for whether or not I lose some of the plant matter. And then while I was working and doing super gluing and stuff like that, I'm using just a simple Mr. bottle like this to keep the plants very lightly wet. And just so you can see, like, we're talking that much, right? Total mist of water, not like a lot. We just want to keep them vaguely wet. And still in all that, like, I've still got some, you'll see just a little bit, stem stuff up here that's floating that I need to get rid of. And I moved some of the stems, and there's still, like, little bits in the corner over here of moss and Java fern I got to clean out of that Florida Sunset over there. That's Florida Sunset. You still got the big mass of Crypt Sri Lanka in the middle. I'm not going to mess with that at all. I love it the way it is. But there's some stuff to add. So, I got some plants from the Aquarium Co-op. Got a lot. Just a couple plants that are long, slow growers that we're going to work on. So I've got a little bit more work to do, but honestly, I just need a break. This was 2.5 hours of solid work just getting this, and then another about hour of removing plant matter, sorting plant matter, and replanting those lilies over here. So all in all, nearly 4 hours of work so far, on top of what I did just selecting and removing the old Java fern last week. And I've got more work to do. So I still have one more piece of the cholla to get set. But here's kind of the, I would say, 60% point. So we still got lots of crypts that are going to be in this tank. The difference is we're going to have the Java fern a little bit lower, not quite as high in the tank. And we're going to put some other stuff in here to take some of that height, but still let the guppies have a lot of swim space up top for the adults especially. And then it's the fry and the young ones that really hide down low in a lot of this plant matter. Although right now, with me shifting a bunch of stuff around, the other fish are investigating everything because there's lots of new particulates everywhere. So we'll get back to work after this this break, and we'll show you the kind of next big change, and then we'll be pretty close to done. So you might hear the tank a little bit. I've got to increase the water level some and clean the overflows, but we're done in this corner over here. And ignore that air stone, that's going to come out too. But, so let's talk about some of the new stuff. So I picked up some plants from Co-op. Those are over here. I've got a pair of Crinum calamastratum back here. So you can see the little one up front, much bigger one in the back. What I'm going to do is just let them mature and do their thing over time, and then let the crypts through here grow in. Just more and more Florida sunset will be in this corner. And then this corner, you see one of my super reds. Ever since I put the wood in, they've been on this stuff like crazy. So we'll see how long this cholla lasts. Hopefully a while, because Nick was super generous to give it to me. And then you can see this big piece in back. This is the newest piece of work here. And this huge piece, I should have filmed it before I put stuff on it, but because it's a gorgeous piece, but I really wanted a lot of plant load, and I made a decision. I didn't want more Wendelov, so you'll see, like, I left what was left of my, like, starter Wendelov up here, and I kind of did an audible. So my thought was, I'm already going to have 3 pieces of Wendelov covered cholla up front, and one little bitty piece of Trident Java Fern right there that's left that I attached. And I wanted some different leaf texture. I still wanted to stay with Java Fern, so I made this, like, really insane log. And we'll kind of change our angle so we can see a little better. So there's a lot of just standard, kind of a narrower leafed standard Java Fern. And then there's also, over here on the edge, there's some boosts, and then in the middle there's a little piece of Anubias Nengi. And then on the far end, another little chunk of boost there. And there's actually, if you see in the back, there's a more crinkled variety of Java Fern, and it's a huge chunk. And then there's that more straight leafed, less crinkled. So these are 2 different species of Java Fern. The longer leafed, more straight edged is just a kind of standard Java Fern, a little narrow leaf, but not true narrow leaf. It's more true Java Fern in its fully immersed form. That came out of the 75-gallon long that I have a ton of. I gotta turn my alerts off on my phone. Sorry about that. And then that crinkly one is actually a really cool species. That is Microsorum species tricolor. You don't see the tricolor underwater. It just stays that. But it's a very rare Microsorum, and I've had it slowly growing for a long time. And that's the wide leaf variety, not the narrow. The narrow is... so you see how it's quite a bit broader in some of those big leaves back there compared to even the standard Java Fern. The narrow is more like when we get needle leaf Java Fern. And it's very hard to find. I've had it tucked away for an eternity. And now it's in here. So the last thing to do, like, you can see some of the lilies popping up over the top there. The goal is to let them fill in the back, and they'll fill in through here as well. And if they, if this stuff starts growing really tall, and I have trouble seeing the lilies, what I'll do is I'll push that log backward, and I'll replant the lilies in the middle, or some other semblance like that. But basically, we're going to have the Nymphea, some Java Ferns, and a little bit of hidden, like, Boos and Anubias down in here. Then lots of crypts. Lots of crypts. The beautiful Crypt Sri Lanka mass that's here. And then the little bit of Petchai pink that's up front. And actually, if you really want to, we'll zoom in kind of on this leaf here, and you can see some of that color. I don't have CO2 running to this tank right now. That's part of the last bits of the makeover are more mechanical. I need to mess with some of the stuff in the back when it comes to my secondary filter. But there's so much plant mess in here and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of questions I'm going to ask in the outro of this, or rather that were asked of me in the previous video. So, and then finally, like, right, you'll have the sunset and the calamastrotums over here, and we're just going to let them grow out over time. So that's what's done. That's the work. There you go. There's all the work. You've seen the plants. I probably should have shot the cholla wood, at least the big piece. I know you guys saw the small pieces before I started adhering plants to them, but I probably should have shot them all just so you could see. And they're magnificent pieces. Again, massive thanks to my buddy Nick over at Trippy Business. I'll put a link down to his website below. I totally realized I forgot it in the last one, so I'll update that. If you didn't see the first one, it'll be in the corner now. Just for sending me those 3 beautiful pieces as a gift. Like, you're such a stellar dude. Thank you so much, and I'm glad I finally got to put them to use. I know it's been they've been in my possession for a while, but I take my time on stuff. Anyway, so as you can see, I really went dense, and there's a reason for that. It's just to make sure that should I start losing any of the plants, there's plenty there to steadily recover on those pieces of wood. I don't anticipate that I will, because I'm not using a ton of glue where I'm gluing and where I'm friction fitting. They're friction fit. They're going to naturally grow in, around, throughout that cholla wood. That's one of the beauties of cholla wood. But you guys brought up several comments in the previous video that I think are really interesting, and I want to quickly address them. So first off, from Kingfisher's Catch, aka Joe Davis, what a difference. With that being said, will you be looking out for any water parameter shifts due to such a big change? Either way, thanks for the content. Joe, thank you. Great question. So, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we've taken out a lot of plant matter, so potentially there is the risk of having some nitrate spikes, and potentially even like an ammonia or nitrite spike. But all I do to counteract that is I'm going to bring down the feeding for a little bit. I mean, there's a big FX6 running filtration on this. There's still this huge mass of crypts. And then, the tank overall is a big tank. We're talking about 140 gallons of water plus extra gallonage inside the filtration systems. So it can handle these kind of things. About the only thing that you don't see that I still have to do in this tank is, and it's one of the few things, like I need to add a little extra crushed coral, and that's just to rebuffer my mineral content. I don't run this tank very hard. I typically am looking for somewhere between 120 to 140 TDS when it comes to my GH. So that's about a GH of 4 to 5. Not very high at all. Surprisingly, I've had the best success with these little guppies at a slightly softer water. Not super hard. And that just comes purely from information from their original mom, my friend Leanne. Leanne, hi. Now, next major question that I think is a really good one, and I want to address. From Amy Cat. I'm curious if that much plants being removed will adjust the nutrient balance, such as light, nitrate, etc., in turn causing an algae spike. Yeah, it can. So my goal was to put a secondary light on this tank, and what I'm going to do at first is stick to just the singular Fluval 3.0. That way I'm not putting too much light on this right away. I'm going to give these plants some time to grow in. I'm going to let the lilies get a little bigger, let those callum, stratum, crinums settle in, and let all this Java fern adjust to its new parameters. Once that's done and I start seeing a little bit of new growth, at least in a few places, then I'll look at adding the other light, and I'll take both lights' overall power setting down just a little bit so that it spreads the light more, but we're not getting too much light. That should inhibit any major algae spikes, and if all else fails, I got a couple super red bristlenose in here, and I got a small school of spotted gara. They're all pretty good algae maintainers. You can see there's not really much except for on the very back of the glass. Not a lot of algae in this tank. Probably not likely to see a big spike, but if I do, it's just something we'll slowly handle over time, treat it naturally, let the water system adjust, and work through it like I would with any other tank. That's pretty much the two major questions that I really wanted to address. The big thing from here on out, some people might say, well, before you had this really big dramatic piece of wood, it turned into this just amazing looking, like layered thing of Java fern and took up a lot. This is not going to take up nearly as much. You're right. But part of that is on purpose. With that big Java fern, especially as it got really tall, it started impeding some of the flow up here, I got off camera on myself, to my overflow and also the inlet flow coming from my FX6. And while the guppies don't necessarily need a lot of flow, this led to some potential issues long term when it came to filtration. Now luckily I have double filters on this tank. It's a big tank. It's got lots of plants. The likelihood of any major serious issue is extremely low, and I've got a lot of safeguards built into this thing on purpose when it comes to the balance of the overall aquarium. It's mostly just a lot of very small fish and a whole ton of plants. Keeping it lower also gives me more visibility up here. This lets me see those fish a lot more and make sure that when they're up top in all that open swim space, swimming around, getting food, that they're less likely to dive deeper into the plants, kind of training them, if you will, that because there's not any plants up high and that's the easiest place to get food, you stay up high to get food, and you don't go low where a lot of the fry are going to hide. Now, this species really is not very predatory on its own babies. However, it's always good to play it safe. Make sure you get a lot more fish. And yeah, you can even see, just in this kind of like blurred shot behind me, there's a lot of guppies in this tank. But I certainly wouldn't mind a few more. That's it, guys. That is the Guppy Mansion makeover for right now. We might do some other things in the future. It depends on how things grow in. I might make some small adjustments about plant placement, depending if I don't like the way the lilies show up, or if the Java fern on some of the wood doesn't get as tall as I want it to. I might bring that more forward. Might add in some other taller plant potentially. We'll see. Pretty unlikely. I think if it all goes according to how my head says it will, this thing's going to look pretty amazing in about 6 months. It's going to take some time. But the thing is, that's what I love the most about aquarium planted tanks, right? In my aquarium hobby, what I love is letting nature do its thing. Letting the plants do their thing, settle in, and just letting that evolve into something beautiful of its own right. As you can see by this big old cluster of crypts, we got a pretty good start. It's just adding a little extra spice and making it nice. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a little thumbs up. Just lightly caress that little like button. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. That way you can see more. I've got a fish room tour coming up that's new. You guys have been hounding me for it. I know. I'm working on it. It does take a lot of time to film and edit. And this took me way longer than I thought. I spent almost 12 total hours working on this tank. And it looks like I spent like 45 minutes. So it's pretty wild, right? But I've got stuff coming. There's all sorts of other product reviews and things like that that are coming. Might even have a few extra little special fun things coming in the near future too. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay awesome.